Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
There we go. Yeah. Can those of you who are out in the hall please come inside? Please come down and have a seat. We got lots of seats up here in the front. Dan's feeling a little lonely up here. You could even sit at the reserve table. Great. Well, thanks a lot for being here today. I know this is the last session, and we're fighting folks' schedules at this point. I think we've got a really great panel. It'll be a very interesting topic today. We're talking about migration to shared services, and I think you're going to find really four different perspectives up here. I have my own view of shared services, and as a provider, I run the shared services operation for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When I think of shared services, I think of my center and providing services very formally to agencies across government. And I think what you're going to find today during our panel is that there are more than that way to provide shared services. There's a lot of good ways to provide efficient service and service that really helps agencies meet their missions and support their missions. So we'll get into that in just a moment. I'm going to introduce the panel real quick. Sitting next to me is Darren Ash. I'm sorry, yeah, Darren. Darren Ash, Deputy Executive Director for Corporate Management at the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Next to him is Mark Neidinger. He's Senior Advisor for Cybersecurity and Communications, Federal Network Resilience at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Next to him, Tim McCrossin, Chief of Agency Oversight and Implementation at OMB. And finally, Matt Goodrich, Acting FedRAMP Director at GSA. So please welcome the panel today. The first thing I would like to do is ask each of the panelists to talk a little bit about how they see their role in shared services. What are they, a user, a buyer, a provider? How has shared services impacted them in their current role? So I'll pass it along here.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Best way to describe NRC, and this puts in the context of where we stand within the spectrum of shared services. Mid-sized agency, roughly a little under 4,000 employees. Not large enough really to provide services, be a shared service provider. So by and large, we're a service consumer. And runs the spectrum of IT services, but even the spectrum of IT acquisition type support through DOT, human capital support through DOI, but even federal protective service that we use through DHS. So it runs a spectrum of things that are provided by other agencies.
Great. Mark?
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm going to be actually focusing on a little bit different perspective in regards to the CDM program. How many of you have ever heard of the CDM program? Continuous Diagnostic Mitigation. After 300 presentations, we only get okay. So the Continuous Diagnostic Mitigation Program is a program that's been funded by Congress to help executive branch agencies so we can identify where there may be cybersecurity gaps in various areas. The program right now, we have 98.7% of the executive branch agencies signed on through MOAs to participate, and a big part of that are the small and micro agencies. So from a shared service perspective, what we're focused on along those lines is be able to provide CDM or continuous diagnostic mitigations within a shared service arena and provide that option to those small and micro agencies. So from that, a lot of activity involved in regards to establishing CONUPs in preparation for the agencies to be able to accept that, supporting the agencies as they're talking to their CIOs, their missions, and OGCs to be able to adopt this option, as well as working with FedRAMP and our JAB group in relationship to taking a look at standards in relationship to high environments, especially as we're taking a look at the agencies that we're talking with to be part of the CDM program, and specifically the option under shared services.
Great, Tim?
So Tim McCrossan from OMB eGov. I'm the guy who is basically telling all agencies that you need to get into the shared services game. We do that a couple of different ways. I participated in a panel last spring to evaluate federal shared service providers for financial services. We evaluated a number of panelists and came out with those approvals this past late spring for financial services, and then we also run the Portfolio Stat program, which we just finished up our next to last Portfolio Stat today. So we've been to virtually every agency, every CFO Act agency, and monitoring your performance in delivering commodity IT. And to the extent that it's practical, we are making recommendations that you consider shared service providers or become a shared service provider yourself.
Great, Matt?
I think the way that FedRAMP offers shared services is probably not the traditional way people might view shared services, but by really having a program that defines how you authorize cloud computing environments, and many of which offer multi-tenant solutions for a vast majority of them, making sure that that security authorization process is done once and reused, really fits into that same sort of concept of shared service of doing security once and having everyone be able to use that in the same way. And so we do that through the Joint Authorization Board and providing some of those authorizations for agencies to use. So the CIOs of DoD, DHS, and GSA work with my program to jointly authorize some cloud providers on behalf of the federal government, but then also set those requirements for other agencies to do the same framework and the same work to authorize providers that other agencies can then leverage. So it's not necessarily the traditional sense of shared services, but definitely fits into that same model of sort of a service that has to be done, that can be done once, and everyone can use and can benefit from that work.
Great. I'm going to go through one slide, put this together for you to consider. It's called the attributes of a shared service provider. I think you're going to see, as I mentioned, a number of models up here that I think we could define as shared services. A lot of folks define shared services as one unit doing something for another, or one unit providing services to multiple units instead of to themselves. That's a pretty broad definition. I think if you look at the major providers, of which I run one, you'll find these attributes, and I think a lot of times, even in the models that Matt, you and Mark talked about, you're going to find some of these attributes, or you're going to find the group gravitating towards these, and I know we're going to talk about funding too. Generally, a shared service provider offers a standardized service. They don't customize the service for each new customer. They definitely have a customer service focus. They're trying to figure out what their customers need and how they can provide that need. A lot of times they're in a revolving fund. I know, Mark, you all have appropriations, so it's a little bit different model there, and Matt, you're really providing more of a vehicle or knowledge as opposed to funding, right? I mean, there's some funding that's paying for the effort. Minimal funding, right? So in a provider that actually provides a service, you might see more of a revolving fund type model. Cost allocations are based on usage, so the customers are paying for what they're getting, and hopefully not more than that. There's unit pricing. There's a full cost recovery model. Sometimes there's the ability to generate capital reserves. There's some way of measuring quality, the quality of the services that are being provided. It's a very deliberate process there. And then finally, customer input to governance. And I think you'll see in a lot of cases, the providers have formal ways for customers to provide input. And then I just wanted to flash up here. I know there's a lot of the providers out in the hallway there with booths, just to sort of show you how they come down in terms of the services they offer. I know that there are fewer than that in terms of payroll, but there's HR up there as well under HR payroll. We've got the 4 recently announced finance providers. We've got some others up here that are, that continue to provide service in a shared service way, et cetera. So just to kind of give you a flavor for the types of services that are being offered in a shared services way. And I'm fully aware this is an IT-centric group, and we're going to be talking a lot about that. But when I go to agencies and I ask them, do you ever use shared services, and they say no, I ask them, who gave you your paycheck? Because typically it's one of the 4 providers. So everybody's using shared services whether they know it or not. So now I'm going to run through some discussion items with the panel up here. This concept of shared services is getting a lot of attention. It's been a hot item for a year or 2 now. I'm just curious amongst the group, has your organization bought into the concept of shared services? And if so, why or why not?
You want me to start?
You go.
Okay, I guess I've got the easiest answer. I guess the answer is yes.
Okay.
We have bought into it by virtue that we've been using shared services for years. I think the thing that we've, in terms of scale and maturity, we've continued to learn as we've deployed, as we've implemented different types of solutions, obviously in partnership with those providers, whether it's financial systems, an acquisition solution hosted by DOT. Those were not, we're going to implement this in a month. Those were months-long efforts, not just from what is it going to take to deploy, but what are the things we need to do to adjust. And so I think from an agency standpoint, we're going to continue to be consumers, but I think we're better educated consumers in terms of really what it takes to implement and use. And I think that's the best thing for us. And like I said, continue to learn from those that we use.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, basically in regards to acceptance of it, the CDM program, DHS specifically in regards to taking a look at CDM and how shared services can be applied is a critical element. Because what we found out as we went out to 124 executive branch agencies and specifically the small and micros, the program itself, the CDM program, what's going to do is provide capabilities to expand the sensor base for agencies to understand really what their infrastructure is about. From that, there's going to be opportunities then for the CISOs and their staffs to be able to mitigate these issues. When you go to the small and micro agencies and the sizes of the staff that are available, you begin to run into challenges. So as we were rolling out the program and talking with the agencies, what we heard very clearly and loudly from the small and micro agencies was we need a model that doesn't require us to increase staffing and basically spend more and more time on the infrastructure. We need to focus on our mission areas. So that's what drove us in regards to taking a look at how we can provide CDM within a shared service environment. So, yeah, we've accepted it. We've also are very cognizant as a lot of the challenges that agencies have run into through shared services. And that's why we're also engaging the small and micro agencies as part of this effort to actually work with us to develop the associated ConOps as to how to manage those services, as well as working with FedRAMP and others in regards to the type of guidance that needs to be provided to the agencies or to the CSPs.
Okay. Yep. Tim or Matt?
I'd add that I think that, one, I would hope that GSA has been behind shared services, sort of an offer of shared services, but so I definitely think we are, but I also think we've taken the concept of shared services beyond sort of the traditional notion of it. If you look at my program, if you look at ECIPIC, other programs that take that concept of, like Darren was saying, 4,000 employees, and you still don't have the ability to offer everything, even with that amount of base of an organization. So really making sure as our agency mission to provide those services and provide the ability to get those services to agencies goes beyond just the traditional notion of shared services definition, but expanding on those sort of the key points I would say in your first slide around making sure that there's a singular offering that fits for all of the federal government, and then have that customer service focus and making sure you have the buy-in from the stakeholders. So I think that's something that beyond just the definition of shared service, we've applied to a lot of other things that we do within GSA as well.
Okay.
The one thing I would take issue with that you just said is, I don't think we need each shared service provider to try to be one-size-fits-all for everything in the federal government, right? I think that what we're probably looking for is a number of sort of specialized shared service providers that fit the model that agencies subscribe to. And I know that when we were looking at the financial services shared service providers, that we specifically went with that intent, that this would be the model that would fit this group or this type of agency, grant-making agencies, defense and homeland security types of agencies. You know, there were models there that we think are going to be very specifically aligned, and so that, you know, don't try to be everything to the federal government, but try to find that niche that makes you more powerful within that segment, your segment.
Great. I guess my next question is about sort of forcing the adoption or educating folks about the benefits of shared services and encouraging them to do them. I think I've found as a provider that we often encounter folks who are unable to compare what we offer to what they do in-house because it's an apples to oranges comparison in terms of the costs or maybe even the quality. It's hard to have those benchmarks. My question is, who's the best group or set of leaders? What level? How do we encourage shared services? Whose role is that? Who can best do it? And I'll let anybody jump on that one.
I think the starting point starts with the C-suite, Chief Financial Officer, the CIO, the CHICAs, others that have responsibility for a lot of the back-end processing type work that needs to go on. The thing that, in terms of their buy-in and acceptance and leadership, and that's really what it's going to come down to, is a leap from, this is the way we've always done it, and we've customized, and I know we don't like the word customize, but we've customized our solutions to fit our processes, and it works. It works and it's effective. Why do I need to change? Second part of the conversation, this is really where the CFO comes in, is do we have a full appreciation of really what the total cost of ownership is? More often than not, and I'm generalizing, we don't have a full understanding of what the cost of really operating that solution is. And it's from that point that we can have that conversation about really, is there a more efficient way to do it? But also, are there things that you need to do in terms of becoming more efficient? This is where things like business process improvement, Lean Six Sigma come in terms of improving how you operate. And is the move or a leap to a shared service provider, again, where you're moving towards a standardized, like you had up on the slide, a standardized approach, is that an opportunity for us to optimize and make much more efficient our processes, and in the end, save money? But that change in process, that change, and really going to begin and end with change, is are we willing to accept that change, and are we willing to lead that change for the good of the agency?
Okay. So we've heard the agencies. Any other opinions?
Again, in relationship to the program that we're putting out there from the shared service aspect, there's two variables that we wanted to be able to address when we were talking with the CISOs, CIOs, OGCs, and such, and that's basically awareness and trust. There's awareness from the perspective, given the purpose of continuous diagnostic mitigation, okay, what's the purpose for putting that in a shared service environment where the benefits associated with it, but then the trust, right? Because basically, from a trust factor, there are a lot of lessons learned that have been vetted among agencies as to things that we need to consider, especially when you're dealing with various providers and ensuring that you have appropriate access and that the various statutes that an agency needs to live to are being addressed, and access to the various cybersecurity credentialing and such as that. So one of the things that we're focused on is not only working with the CSO or the CISO in regards to what CDM within the shared service environment would be about and how to manage that and the impact of it, but how can we help the CISO work with the CRO and the OGC to make sure that there's a confidence and trust value there. So I agree totally with you in regards to the C-suite people. In the CDM case, it's not only building that trust and but it's also the awareness piece too.
So to borrow a line from my colleagues down in the Office of Federal Financial Management, you either are a shared services provider or you are a shared services consumer. There's no room anymore to operate your own independent one-off financial system. And on top of that, if you are a shared services provider, the drive now is to provide a very vanilla type of shared service. Take out the customizations, take out all of the stuff, the nuance that makes it unique, because everybody's business, everybody's mission is special, but not everybody's business is unique. And so we have to wipe the unique aspects away. Generally acceptable accounting practices are the same from DHS to HUD to Treasury, and so as long as we're subscribing to the same standards with respect to accounting principles and HR principles and payroll, all of those things pretty much work about the same. So strip out the uniqueness, make them from vanilla, and then either you're a provider or a consumer, and that's, I think, generally where we're going. I hope that if I would flash forward 10 years from now, that the universe would really be divided up into those two camps, that nobody would really be providing this service just to your agency. I don't think as a government we can afford that. I don't think the taxpayers are going to stand for that.
So Tim, who decides who's a user and who's a provider, and how do we enforce that?
So I don't think that we can force that, right? There are certain instances in which, I've had visibility into a situation in which an agency is just struggling and really just needs a little encouragement to say, okay, yeah, we're going to go to a shared service for this. We just can't do this. We can't afford to do this on our own, and we don't have the ability or the wherewithal to get to the finish line on a big, substantial project like that. But those are very few. Instead, I think that it's an enticement and encouragement. It's a carrot. We have portfolio stat sessions, we have the benchmarking sessions in which we're collecting the data. And so, especially with benchmarking, which is part of the President's management agenda, we collected a wide swath of data. Granted, it was the first time we collected this data, so the data is somewhat flawed, but I think the data showed that, from payroll transactions, from invoice, how much does it cost you, an agency, to process an invoice, Prompt Pay Act, those are the types of things that we had in that benchmarking discussion, and I think that it led to a very fruitful conversation with the agency, as Darren said, the agency C-suite. We're meeting with deputy secretaries, administrators of agencies, the CIO, CFO, HR, Chico. And so I think that's what creates a powerful conversation, when we can say, here's the data, here's what your performance indicates, and here's where your peers are, and to the extent that there's a delta there, I don't need to make a more powerful or compelling case. The data is making the case for me.
Tim, if you borrow something from what Steve has talked, Steve Van Rokel has talked about commodities. I'm not necessarily saying this is a commodity, but if this is it necessary or is it important for you as an agency to focus on the most important things, and can you defer to another agency to support you in those processes? I think in a number of instances, as we've talked about commodities, it's more important for us to focus on the true mission items.
Sure.
And the true mission activities, and let somebody else support you in financial management or payroll.
I mean, that slide there, I mean, those agencies right there that are doing finance, they're doing it well. We have already looked at those agencies and said, okay, the side that you had previous to this, we went through and evaluated those topics. Are they responsive to their customers? Are they providing that vanilla capability? Do they have a chargeback method? Do they have a way of funding this that's not going to go out of business, 2 years down the line? And so we've evaluated those types of capabilities, and especially with the HR and payroll, those are long-standing capabilities that have been in place and have a lot of horsepower. There's opportunities to improve, and as a customer, you get a say in that. And so that's where we can kind of come in and sort of nudge and say, you have to be responsive to your customers. I think legislation that's coming down, the Data Act is going to provide a good opportunity to sort of test out and prove as we get new requirements. If you're a shared service consumer, your expectation should be that those emerging and new requirements are met by the shared service provider. You shouldn't have to worry about it. It should be blind to you.
Matt, any thoughts?
Not going to be nearly as eloquent as what he said. I would argue. I mean, the only thing I'm going to echo that you were saying earlier, on topic earlier, was the thing we've dealt significantly with in my program was, and you stole my line of everyone's special. Everyone learned that from like age 8 when your mom was telling you and you're going to school that you're special. But not everyone's unique. But it's getting people to understand the difference between the two. And so for us to actually get to where we had a security model that worked across the federal government was getting people to look at their security requirements as not unique to them, but a security that was needed for their overall data and taking it back to what was necessary. So to your point too of it's not necessarily vanilla across everybody, but looking at in general federal IT data, you can put it into the categories that FISMA has already created, that ICE has already created, right? And realizing that you are not unique in that. They've already created the unique categories, but yes, your data is special, it's special to you, but then making them realize that, I think, is really important in terms of the shared services model, and one thing that has been sort of unique. I guess I shouldn't use the term unique since I'm saying don't say that. But it's something that I think is really critical to understand as you offer those services and across the federal government. So I just wanted to echo that.
Access control, right? AC 5, I believe, is the same for every agency. It's exactly the same. There's no unique capability or component to access control and least privilege.
Right. Yeah. I won't even say, I mean, just the format of, if you're in the HR system, you want this column here versus this column here. Like, that's not unique. Making sure that just because you want that specific format readout because you've always had it is not what's important. Same with us with some of our security requirements of looking at, is that actually a unique thing? No, this is what it actually needs to be done. So that's just something that I think permeates across every aspect of shared services.
Great, thanks. The title of our panel is Critical Success Factors in Migration to Shared Services, and I want to ask a question that gets to the heart of that. At the Program Support Center, we operate 300 health clinics around the country for federal employees to use, and typically they're multi-tenant clinics. We've got different agencies that all come together and pay us to operate the clinic. It's usually pretty easy to switch from operating your own clinic to having us do it, or going from a contracted clinic to having us do it. But I would put that on one end of the spectrum, and perhaps on the other end of the spectrum would be handing over your financial system, as I know FIT is working on right now. What are the critical success factors for migrating to a shared services? And what's most important? What do you think? What do you got to get right? You might be able to speak. I'll start down there. We'll let
not having actually done it myself, but working with some of our agencies who've done that, as well as looking at cloud services as sort of an analogous piece of moving to a different environment of something that you're no longer doing and owning yourself, that you're sort of outsourcing in the same way, is really looking at it from buying something new. So federal IT grew pretty much organically. We needed a data center, then we needed an app, then we needed this, and we just sort of grew organically. But then when you're going to buy something new, this is where shared services, particularly built for the federal government, are very powerful, is that you have to then take into consideration all of the other aspects of what's needed. So me as the program manager, at the end of the day, I just want my service. But I'm not going to be thinking about the legal requirements, about FOIA, about privacy, about records management, and all of that. But you have to, as you buy something new and as you're migrating to that service, because it's no longer something that has been built within my agency to support that. So I think that's where the shared services model is really critically important for a lot of agencies, because as those shared services are built, they're designed to take care of a lot of those needs, and a lot of those considerations are already in place when you're going to migrate to that. So that's one thing that's been really sort of interesting to see from it, looking at people migrating to shared services, is that aspect that's very hard for some agencies to wrap their minds around when they move to the cloud, It was already somewhat taken care of as you move to a shared service by another agency.
So I would say that the critical thing is don't underestimate the pain. I can only guess that it would be similar to getting divorced, right? I mean, you have a provider today inside the agency who's providing this service, this capability, whatever it may be. And at some point, we're saying, we're going to get it from over here. And so that work, these people who were doing that thing are no longer going to be doing that thing. And there's a lot of pain there. You know, these people are going to say, haven't I been responsive to you? Haven't I met your requirements? Haven't I, stayed late, worked hard? And the answer is yes, you have. It's just, the problem is that it doesn't make financial sense for us to continue to do that way. And so there's considerable pain in having this type of break. These people, we need to find them something else to do within the organization, and that's oftentimes a very difficult conversation to have.
I agree with all of that. I think in addition to that is realization that it doesn't make sense for everything, right? And that there must be really a true business model tied to it. And again, going to the perspective that I'm bringing to the table here, is there a business model in regards to being able to offer CDM, continuous dynamics mitigation within a shared service environment for all agencies? Probably not. So what are the attributes of that positive business model? Basically, looking at in regards to impact in regards to the staffing and basically increasing the efficiency of being able to address mitigation issues because you're sharing staff now, sharing infrastructure. So what is that business model, and also understanding the associated costs, both agreeing with them in regards to the human side as well as the financial side for the long run. Because at one point there may be a determination that this shared service model doesn't make sense anymore. So how do you back out of that? And what is that escape clause? So those are key elements that we've seen that we're trying to build also into how we're addressing the ConOps for actually implementing this going forward.
Mark, you've mentioned a few times it appears the folks that are most welcoming your services are the smaller micro agencies, the smaller folks. Do you find that it's a different challenge when you get to a big one, or is it the same thing just on a little bit bigger scale?
We're going to be offering this to you the full range, but it's really small micros that has had the most interest that really drove us to, okay, let's define or be able to provide this type of capacity. There are some larger CFO-backed agencies that, on the outside perspective, it may make sense. They need to obviously feel comfortable in taking a look at that, especially agencies that are very federated. So there are, CFO-backed agencies that it probably would make sense, but at this juncture, the focus has been on small and micro, but the capacity is going to be made more broadly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think the first critical success, I'm not going to repeat what the other gentleman said. The first one is how effective your change management process is. And that's not a technical, I don't look at it as a technical change. I look at it as purely an organizational, cultural, and behavioral change. And how effective you are in communicating, how effective are you in getting the buy-in at all levels. I think Tim touched on part of it, is getting people to understand. I mean, it's no different than telling people you're going to remove their trash cans and only going to have one on each floor. For some people, that's a big change. Changing from one provider to another, or doing it yourself to another provider, is a big change. It is a significant change. It affects people personally because they've invested their careers in being as efficient and effective as possible in whatever that is. And now you're telling them that we're going to change. And so you as an organizational leader have to, that is one of the first things you have to think about. Not the technical aspects, not the acquisition perspective, not the interagency, but how are we going to sell it within the organization? And can we be successful? Can we be effective in communicating? The second piece, and this is something that hits home for me on a recurring basis, and it's gotten a lot better of late, is data quality. And I really look at it from an end-to-end processing. And the best example I can give is, so I mentioned in some of my opening remarks, we use a shared service provider for our core financial system, and we now utilize services from Department of Transportation. They host our acquisition solution. The wrong answer, and we did not do it this way, the wrong answer is looking at two individual components. We've stood up our financial system, we've got it working effectively, we're doing all the great things, and then we've stood up our acquisition system. Doing it great. The right answer, and the way we approached it and spent a lot of time on the front end, even before we stood up our acquisition system, which came second, was on data and data quality, because we knew that my definition is the cradle to grave of money meant that we needed to have it standardized throughout, both from a communications perspective, obviously the interfaces, but just even the definition, and this was, literally this came up this week, is what is the definition of a core? Like everybody knows what a core is. And I do not make this up. We have our definition, we have our data in our acquisition system of the cores within the agency. The financial folks use that information too, but really what it came down to is which core are you looking for? And there were I think they said seven different variations of it, and it became a conversation piece of which one do we really need? And again, it gets back to how the organizations communicate and communicate effectively, but also even internally defining those requirements. But we spent months on the front end just on the data and data quality so that we knew that when it went live, it would make for an effective outcome, business outcome. But again, it's that front end thinking that was, frankly, in my view, more important than the technical aspects.
Great. I want to throw this open to the audience now. If you have any questions or want to join in the conversation, I'd love to hear what you have to say. You just raise your hand. I'm not sure if we have mics or... we got them right there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Cohen. I work at the Federal Trade Commission in the IT department. So my question is kind of in two parts. One is it an accepted standard across the government that if you move part of your operation to a shared service that you can just retrain the people that used to do that job and keep them in your agency? And then secondly, if that is not the case, what resources do agencies have to find the path to go down, that painful path you were talking about, in terms of figuring out, okay, how do we get from here to a shared service, and then how do we deal with the people that were once doing that?
Anybody want to
Want me to
start?
So first, say hi to Bhajinder for me. I'm going to non-answer your question by saying this is where the agency has to make their own decisions. So in the situation in which it's just an IT system, right? So we were running an IT system, now we're going to be leveraging an IT system that's over there. All of the, let's say if it's financial management system, all of the people who were processing invoices and making, paying out money, accounts payable, they're all doing the same thing. It's just they're hitting a keyboard that's connecting to a different system. That's one type of change. You're limited in terms of the people because it's basically just the IT people who are supporting that. And as we know, okay, we have more work for IT than what we have IT people, which is why we need to keep hiring good IT people so we can figure out a good place to try to move them around to support the organization going forward. In the situation in which we're going to be getting a full service financial services capability where they're actually processing our invoices for us, that becomes a much more difficult transition. I'm working with an agency right now that is in the midst of that kind of transition, and it's painful because, and it's the point that Darren made that's the most crucial. You have to convince those people who are today processing those invoices and managing the accounts, that there will be a place for them, or there will be some sort of transition that they have to be able to spot the landing. because if they cannot spot the landing, this becomes the number one issue for them. And guess what? You need those people to participate in your project to get transitioned over to the new shared service capability. And, if you don't convince these people early and stay on that course, you have to reinforce that message all the time, they will tank your project. And I've seen it. I've seen it happen a couple of times. And so, they become the lifeblood of actually achieving success.
These are the individuals that, use the right phrase or wrong phrase, the ground truth of how everything works. They know the data, they know the warts, they know how things work. And they're the secret to your success. And you're right, they have to be brought along. Even as we migrated to shared service providers, whether it was acquisition or other things, we did not lift people. These people are still part of our organization, and part of it's the recognition early on. Do we need to give them some additional training? Because they're valuable people to the organization. Especially if they've got some IT capabilities, strong capabilities, how can we best utilize them in other things? We're migrating, ultimately going to implement e-travel too. Can those individuals support other types of projects, other types of programs that are of importance to this agency, and do the right thing? And that really gets how we as an organization look at our most important assets, our people, and the skills that they can bring, whether within my organization or other parts of the agency.
Any other questions? Got one down here.
John, Dobriansky.
We're right behind you.
Can everyone hear me? John Dobriansky, and I wanted to echo Darren's comment. I was involved with a number of the Department of Defense enterprise resource planning acquisition and implementation, and data quality and having excellent data quality up front was just a huge critical success factor. And I also wanted to add, making sure that the systems are integrated, meaning, that the CFO's system integrates well with the CAO's system so that there's a smooth flow of data and including, common taxonomies and definitions. I think it's a real critical success factors.
I think we have time for one more question if we've got any.
It's going to be a hard question.
Go easy on us, Dan.
Thank you all for coming, sharing these great insights. A theme that we've talked about during various panels, and this morning, was the role of industry. And you've talked a lot about the challenges faced in terms of government employees. From your perspectives, having gone through migrations at an agency, provided migrations, working with other agencies, what role would you see as sort of the best contribution that industry partners can make, either as supporters of shared service centers providing services or providers of solutions from which the government can learn, et cetera? What's the proper role, do you think?
I'll start. We migrated from an agency shared service provider to a commercial. It's probably been now 2+ years, 3 years, seems like. And I think the value added for industry was being a full partner in helping us recognize and realize it can be done in terms of the migration, especially in a short amount of time. Being open about really what it's going to take, but also our commitment, the things that we had to do as government to make this real. Again, I truly saw it as a partnership. A number of things that obviously industry had to do to make it happen, but it's that open and candid conversation about what should be success and how can we make it successful.
I would chime in there and say, so on both sides of the equation, right, the agency who's moving to a shared service provider and the shared service provider both need to have that partner, right, on each side of that equation. And those partners need to figure out a game plan for working well together, right? I've seen instances in which there's been a disconnect between the partners that creates a problem for us when we come to acceptance testing and validating that the capabilities that are supposed to be there are there. And so to the extent that the partners can figure that dance out early in advance of the government side coming in and kicking the tires themselves, it just makes it much more smoothly. I've seen both instances where the partners have had a good, strong working relationship prior to that engagement, and where they haven't, and where they have had that relationship and sort of figured out that dance, it's been a much smoother transition. So reach out to that other team to the greatest extent practical.
Dan, if you don't mind, I'll say two things. One is that a lot of the shared service providers rely heavily on vendors already. So by moving work into their realm, you're increasing the contributions that we're going to need from vendors. The other thing is that whenever change occurs, that's when we need the private sector the most. So if you're sailing along, everything's kind of just going the way we've always done it, we can do that with feds. We don't need a lot of expertise sometimes. But when there's a big change like this, where we're moving folks onto other systems or bringing them in, turning things off, turning other things on, we really need a lot of help that's not going to last forever. So it's very logical to go to the private sector and say, hey, we've got this 3-year project. We need to vamp up in a big way, and we know that's going to go back down.
Can I add something to that as well? So for a lot of different shared services, there are critical times of the year. If I'm thinking like acquisition services, there's a point in time from pretty much mid-July through the end of the fiscal year where you can't accept any change, right? And for financial services, same type of thing. You can't accept any change during this blackout period. Other lines of business will have different blackout periods. And so what I would ask is help the government in terms of organizing and recognizing these blackout periods and putting together a project plan that is going to hit those marks. When we don't figure those blackout periods into the plan, it just causes additional complexity and confusion for everybody. And I've seen projects actually get delayed 9 months because we missed our target by 1 month, right? If we're going to miss it by a month, we might as well just plan for the 9 month. But getting the plan in sync with those ebbs and flow within the work life cycle is going to be very helpful to all of us.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Please thank our panel again.
Paul, thank you for moderating the session, and thank you all panelists. Well, my name is Hang Nguyen. I have the pleasure to introduce our last speaker of the day. I know this is very late in the day. Between you and happy hours is me and Joe. So Joe trained as an engineer. He's received his Presidential Rank Award for Distinguished Executive Service. He was the Director of Enterprise Service Office at the National Imagery and Mapping Agency. He was the DCIO at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He was the CIO at NOAA, and was also the Director of High Performance Computing and Communication Infrastructure. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Joe Klamovich, the Assistant Attorney General for Information Services and Management, and the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Justice.
Okay, so thank you very much, Hung and Dan, everybody, for inviting me. I realize that this is the last talk of the day, so I'm going to try to step through this pretty quickly, but I've been involved in shared services for quite some time and have a bit to say here. We've all heard about the great discussion today, and I especially really appreciate the last panel, a lot of good discussion. We've heard about the drivers, the benefits, the challenges associated with implementing shared services in the federal government. Although the shared IT services are not new, this whole discussion is not new, they are an increasingly important part of the federal-wide effort to reduce waste and improve performance. Sharing IT services not only reduces duplication and eliminates unnecessary surplus within the infrastructure to drive down costs and to realize the cost savings, it also bolsters the IT infrastructure. And this particular aspect that maybe isn't discussed enough. Instead of standing up individual services that are difficult to integrate and cost more to maintain, shared IT services strengthen IT resources by improving functionality and capabilities while bringing greater flexibility to the organization and information to meet customer needs. So from 2012 until May of this year, I served as the co-chair of the Federal Shared Services Initiative. And though this effort was established under the Federal CIO Council, it's really larger than IT, and I think you heard some of that with the last panel. In order to be successful, shared services need to be linked to strategic sourcing, opening up contracts for use across the federal government, and working with our financial community on managing and allocating funding, critical aspects of shared services. During my time as co-chair, I met with all the lines of business and every other federal shared services provider, discussing experiences and best practices. I also met with several international government organizations focused on shared services. What I learned is that individual agencies across the federal government and also abroad all share common challenges and lessons learned. Every organization is focused on cutting costs and implementing shared services as a way to drive innovation and address shrinking budgets. Now, my 30-plus career in the federal government, I have served in several CIO positions, and implementing shared services has always been a priority for the very reasons we talked about, even before it became a popular term. Most recently, as CIO for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, I was also, as Hung mentioned, the Director of High Performance Computing. What we developed there was one NOAA high performance computing strategy that moved the computing from lab-centric computing, where all the labs did their own purchasing and provisioning of supercomputing, to a remote shared computing architecture and a holistic contracting model. We consolidated existing high-performance computing centers. We bought a new supercomputer, more robust computer. We're located in a Department of Energy data center, thus enabling a synergistic effect of increasing computing, sharing computing, and minimizing facility costs. A clear and consistent strategy, strong program management are part of implementing, critical success factors for implementing shared services. And I think, as one of the panelists mentioned, it's hard work, and you need to pay attention to details. In my current position as CIO for Department of Justice, we are migrating from traditional IT service delivery model, where IT services are typically designed and built and run in-house, to one of a service broker model, where IT infrastructure and commodity IT services are sourced from best-in-class service providers. And this truly means from any source, whether it be in-house or in one of our many components in Department of Justice, private sector, other government agencies. We want to make sure that we're providing the best possible service. Initially, we're targeting infrastructure services like security, data centers, storage, email, telecommunications. Next tier is going to address business enterprise services like desktop, voice, and collaboration. Now, this model is new for Department of Justice, and we want to learn from others, and that's one of the great values of attending events like this. But we want to learn from government agencies, industry, how to make this model part of the culture. Shared services, from my perspective, should be the de facto way that we deliver IT services. And the service broker model, where you have an honest broker that actually can take the requirements and needs and look to provision services from best in class, I think is key and makes the whole moving to shared services much easier. Now, everyone in this room understands the value and benefits of shared services, but I think the real barrier to implementing shared services on a broader scale is addressing the core challenges, key challenges. And in my experience, one of the biggest challenges in implementing shared services is governance. Most efforts to consolidate or to share IT services fail due to governance issues. The loss of control for those giving up resources in a shared services environment, it's a unique challenge, especially for small contributors who may not have a significant influence in the direction of that service. Governance in shared services must address understanding and agreeing to expectations in the direction of the given service in order to resolve inevitable conflicts arising from fulfillment, change management, which I think Darren mentioned, or somebody mentioned earlier previously, pricing, chargeback policies. These issues are going to come up, and you need to figure out before you actually enter into shared services how you're going to resolve these issues. Leadership, engagement, strong sponsorship with the authority and accountability is a must for shared services to be successful. And as I mentioned earlier, really nothing is more important than good project management, because you've got to really ensure that you're getting the performance, enforcing deadlines, keeping projects within budget, and it is essentially a project management activity to move to a shared services. Other key challenges: lack of visibility of available shared services, acquisition and budget restrictions, data security and privacy, business models, and performance requirements. As the federal government, we need to encourage and facilitate ways for agencies to adopt shared services as one of the primary service delivery models for IT services. And in fact, it should be the de facto number one way that we provision basic IT services. Existing funding transfer processes, I think, are slow and cumbersome, and they need to be revamped to support shared services across departments. Now, there are ongoing efforts to overcome some of these challenges that I've mentioned, such as the creation of the Uncle Sam's list, which is an ongoing online marketplace for shared services offerings. This is an excellent step in making sure people are aware of services out there that can be shared, but I think more needs to be done. A broader set of contracts need to be made available to all federal agencies. Without significant engagement at the federal level with acquisition and financial experts, shared services will never realize or reach the true potential from a cost savings perspective. So in summary, shared services are a powerful approach, powerful tool to reduce cost, increase quality, and quickly deliver new capabilities. Widespread adoption of shared services will help bring standardization across the federal government and enable a leaner, more agile, and more efficient government. Ultimately, everything we're doing in the shared services arena, though, whether it's IT or other services, is done with a focus of freeing up money, bringing money back to the basic mission. We're trying to bring back mission by being as efficient as we can in delivering IT services. We need people with innovative, creative ideas to solve these problems, these challenges. And I'm going to take it that if you're in this room here still at 4 p.m., that you really believe in and are passionate about shared services. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to start talking amongst yourselves, bring your ideas to the Shared Services Task Force. But I would encourage you to be bold and do not hesitate or be afraid to change the way the government does business, because that's really what we need to do, and that's where we're going to really achieve the vision of shared services and the fruition of all the possibilities of shared services. So again, thank you, Hong and Chuck and Dan, for inviting me to speak today. Wish you all the very best. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. You all get the prize for the longest-lasting attendees at the conference. Thank you for staying with us all day. I think, Joe, great remarks for us all to think about as we go back to our jobs and think about how we can best implement. I especially want to again thank Hung and Chuck and the Federal CIO Council Task Force for their role in making this a very successful event. To Sherry Weir, my comrade in arms, thank you, Sherry. And also to the entire planning committee whose names are listed in the program who really helped make this successful, and to all of you for your contributions during the day. This will not be a one-time event. We will continue this conversation at this year's Executive Leadership Conference. We hope to see many of you in Williamsburg at the end of October, where one of the tracks will be really thinking about what are the next steps in shared solutions, and that'll really be addressing shared solutions and how do we create services that bring and deliver mission benefits across a range of areas. And we'll continue to work that during the year. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Thanks again for coming. Take care.